So today we're talking about ownership, and not just ownership in general, but ownership of yourself first and foremost. That leads to ownership of assets. Stay tuned. So welcome back to the channel. I'm Zion, and today, like I said, we'll be talking about ownership, how important it is to be at first the owner of yourself, ownership of the self first, and that then leads into ownership of assets, whether that be real estate, stocks, whatever the case may be. You have to become the owner of yourself, of your mind first. This lines up perfectly for everything that I always talk about. That being investing, right? If you check back on my channel, you'll see that I first talked about investing in real estate, which is an amazing opportunity to become wealthy in this country. When you think about investing, that's the control of capital, right? I then transitioned into discipline. You can think about discipline almost how I describe ownership being the control of the self, control of the mind. You getting control over that leads to so many great things. Now we're talking about ownership, and we're gonna get more specific, but it's the control of direction, and we'll get into that a little later. Really quick, let's redefine what ownership is at the root of it. So most people, when they think of ownership, you'll think of business, you'll think of property, you'll think of assets. You might even think of a side hustle. But let's think about ownership in a way in which we usually don't think of it. Ownership is taking responsibility, taking accountability for the outcomes you have and not just your assets. For most people, including myself in certain cases, our time goes to places and people if it were up to us, we wouldn't lend our time to, right? Whether that be a job, which is most likely the case for the vast majority of people. We give our time to a job. We give our time to people who don't deserve our time. And having a job and giving our times to jobs is completely understandable. But with the extra time that we have, with the time that is not spent on a job, is not spent working for somebody else, how do we use that time? Because if we're only using our time to work, and basically saying if we're only using our time to pay bills, the other time we use that's going to waste could be something that we could be using to make ourselves better in whatever way possible. So that's where it leads into the question of, well, who controls our time? Who controls it? Well, if I just was talking about a job, our employer, our supervisor, our boss controls our time. And having a boss for a short period of time or a long period of time may be what is necessary for your situation, but always consider that you want to be in full control of your destiny. You want to be in full control of the path in which your life is going. And the more time you give over to that boss, that supervisor, that employer, the less time you'll have to seek out what exactly you should be doing in this life. So what do you trade your time for? Well, you trade your time for exactly that. Let alone the people that you actually want to spend time with, the things you actually want to spend time on, those take a hit as well. Remember that time on this earth is limited. Once the time we have on this earth once the time that we have on this earth has expired, there is no coming back. So it's not to say YOLO, do whatever you want to do, and it's not to say be reckless about the decisions you make, but we want to be calculated, and we want to make sure that the things that we are looking to do in this life, we're given the right amount of time to. Remember, most people work 8 hours a day, right? Let's call it 8 hours a day. You get off from that 8 hour day. Say you were to give 1 hour every day to a goal or to something you want to accomplish, something you want to see for yourself, a skill you wanted to develop, a certain trait you wanted to inhibit? What if you were to give 1 hour every day to that thing? How would your life change in the next month, even the next week? What type of changes would you see? So ownership of time, we don't let the time control us. Within the amount of time that we have, we control what we can control. So take better ownership of our time, and that's the first step to ownership of the self. Now I just spoke on the decisions we make briefly, and this is going to be a pretty brief second step. This is the second step when it comes to the ownership of the self. You want ownership of your decisions. Now, what does this mean? Whatever you decide to do is what you decide to do. There is no excuses. There is no blaming. You hear a lot. People want to blame racism. If you're a man, sometimes you want to blame women. If you're a woman, you want to blame a man for whatever situation you're in. Whatever decision you make is the decision you make. So as grown people, and as people that are looking to elevate in this life and ultimately become owners of ourselves, owners of our mind, we have to own every decision we make. Simple as that. There is no blaming somebody else. We are the reason why we're in the situation we're in, and there's no way around that. Now, one thing we have to make sure is that whatever situation we're in, we have to have a growth mindset and not a fixed mindset. A fixed mindset is something in which people adapt because maybe they have always grown up in a bad situation. Maybe they have always grown up in poverty, in bad relationships with family, with other people. And what they tend to do is those past experiences they've had, they think they deserve nothing but that for the rest of their life. But with a growth mindset, you understand that whatever situation you're in is partially your fault. So you're taking that responsibility, as I spoke on, you're taking that responsibility as a grown person. And you're saying, if it wasn't for me doing this, if it wasn't for me doing that, I wouldn't be here. But with me knowing that, I can maneuver in this way and I can get myself out of it. So adapt, if you haven't already, that growth mindset and not a fixed mindset. A fixed mindset will keep you in the same place forever. Now, if that's something that you want to look for, if that's something that you're achieving, then you probably should not be on this channel. But a growth mindset is the right mindset. So yes, become a better owner of your decisions. You can't blame the market if you're in investing. You can't blame your friends. You can't blame your boss. You can't blame the white man. You can't blame a man. You can't blame a female for whatever has happened to you. It is what it is, and we just have to continue to keep pushing. Now, the third thing we have to own when we're looking to own ourselves is the ownership of skill. So I'd already spoken on, if you have a skill that you want to develop, it is a skill that or if it's already developed, in your mind, you should already have it to where you're looking to monetize that skill. Simple as that. You're looking to monetize the skill that you have, because income will follow skill ownership. You think about some of the trades that people have, being a plumber, being an electrician, being a carpenter. These are skills that cannot be outsourced. Those skills specifically cannot be outsourced. You think about people, they have this idea that the AI robots are taking over and it's going to be like iRobot, and a lot of jobs will be taken away. They will be outsourced by those AI robots, and that's unfortunate. But see, that gives you incentive to learn a real skill. It gives you that motivation to learn something real, because there are some things that cannot be accomplished with just AI. There needs to be that human touch. And when we own some of the skills that we have, and I remember growing up, I thought the only skills to have were singing, dancing, playing basketball, playing football, being a comedian, everything where it had to do with performing. But skills can be as simple as being a handyman, being somebody good with your hands. You could be somebody that's a good communicator. You could be somebody who's good with children, good with adults, you're nurturing, whatever the case may be. All of these are gifts from the Most High that we have to seek out. How can we earn? How can we maximize our earning potential by using these God-given skills? And one thing about skills are, I know all of us have heard of the term jack of all trades, where somebody may be good at a lot of things but great at nothing. Well, you realize that you being great at one thing can get you paid. You being superb, you being above the rest at one specific thing can get you paid. So in this case, being a specialist is not bad at all. Being a generalist can sometimes put you among the crowd, but being somebody who is extremely proficient at one specific thing can potentially make you a millionaire. And last but not least, the ownership of assets. Now, the ownership of assets is whenever everything basically comes together. Your discipline is where it needs to be. Your mind is where it needs to be. Everything is where it needs to be. And now you can step into the world of real estate, of the stock market, of whatever you want to invest in, because everything leading up to this has been about you preparing for this moment right here, the ownership of assets. Now, for me personally, real estate is something I already own. Recently got my second property back in October. What assets do, hopefully, whenever you're beginning to get paid off the assets that you've invested in, they allow you to buy back your time. So it goes back to that ownership of time, because that's what we want the most. We want the most time with our family and friends. We want the most time to travel. We want the most time to dedicate to whatever we're trying to develop. Assets, whenever you're succeeding, whenever you're on the path to making money off these assets, they allow you to get that time. Now you don't have to be at that job as long, right? Now you don't have to be worried about these people you don't want to worry about, you don't like, you don't respect for much longer, because you understand that with this asset that you have something that's tangible, you have something that's appreciating, and you have something that's making money, so that you don't have to continuously be what is called in the rat race. Now, with your assets, you have things like equity, especially when we're talking about real estate, in which I got into in my Level Up series. You have things like equity in which you can leverage. And with this leverage, you can continue to grow your portfolio with what you've already bought, with what you've already invested in. So it's truly a beautiful thing. So the assets are the most important tangible thing when it comes to ownership, because you buy back your time, and you always have something that's growing that you know can eventually help you get out of trading your time for money. But the most important intangible thing you can own is the mind and the self. Simple as that. So the ownership of assets comes last, but the ownership of self comes first and foremost. Let's have that ingrained into our mind. So I hope that's ingrained into your mind up until this point, because we have to have control of ourselves. We have to have control of ourselves if we want any success in anything, because we can't chase financial freedom. If that's the ultimate goal, we can't chase financial freedom by chasing freedom itself. We have to take responsibility early on and get used to doing so. And one thing about ownership is that concept can be somewhat uncomfortable. And I know you've heard on different podcasts or media outlets or different types of content where people will speak on getting out of your comfort zone. And that's amazing. And that's true, because ownership is heavier than comfort, but it's lighter than regret. So you don't want to think back on your life and you regret not being able to own this, or you regret not being able to take back your time. You wish you would have done more to spend more time with your kids, with your family, or whoever. So it is true to get out of your comfort zone and really reflect on how you can become a better owner of your mind. And our objective is not to own every single thing that we see, but we want to own something. But own the responsibility that comes with owning something tangible. And that's where we set ourselves on the right path toward freedom. So all in all, why is it that ownership of the self comes before ownership of assets? Because when we're able to control ourselves, when we're able to compartmentalize, whether we succeed or whether we fail, whenever we own whatever asset we decide to own, we'll be able to take it. We'll be able to take it on the chin, take the L's, take the W's. However it comes, we'll be equipped for it. So yes, that was a short video on ownership, how important ownership is, but how important it is to own yourself. And through owning yourself, owning your life, owning your own life, will lead you to owning assets, and this will lead us to achieving whatever it is we set out to achieve in this life. So thank you so much for watching. I pray that everything in this video serves you well. Win at all costs, and I'm out.